Nice. Thank you, Stream Elements.
We couldn't do this without you.
Hold on, I'm watching an ad for a truck. There's a bear in it. Yeah. It has everything to do with the Nissan Armada for some reason. All right, ad's done.
Let's do it.
Hey. What's up? Happy to be here.
Same here. I know it hasn't been in a while, but it's finally Friday. It feels like it's been many weeks since it's been Friday, but
So
it
long.
finally is.
Finally. We made it. That was a long stretch. Hey. It's an achievement.
I've been playing some universes. I was out in Texas competing in the tournament there for nationals. And while I had a pretty solid showing myself, two of my teammates managed to make the top 16, and both of them secured their spots for Worlds. So they'll be competing this weekend, starting tomorrow, and I'm hyped to cheer them on. Also been playing some World of Wild Hearts. One of my friends been getting back into Pokemon TCG and Magic the Gathering, so I've been getting to retread some old territory there. And yeah, of course, been living my own life in Ohio, doing all that. Could be worse.
Yes. I respect that take immensely. Could be worse. That's where I'm at too. It's pretty exciting about your friends hitting Worlds. That sounds like a pretty good time coming up in a week.
Yeah.
For me, I have been not sleeping much. It's been a rough stretch. I'm looking after a puppy, and for my parents, it's a 5-week stretch looking after her, and 5 weeks feels a lot longer when you have a puppy around all day every day that you didn't really sign up for. But we're getting there, almost done. There are some good moments. She's really sweet and she's really cute. She's just a handful. So that's the majority of what's been going on with me. Just trying to make it through day by day, dealing with what feels like just an insane small child in, in my house. Yeah, but been doing some streaming of Hearthstone, of course. The mini set came out for StarCraft, and there's some pretty cool cards. I think one of the last times we were on, I was saying, give Kerrigan now, please. And Kerrigan has lived up to everything I hope for. Kerrigan's awesome. There's a lot of really cool things in the StarCraft mini set, and Hearthstone has, had its ups and downs like always with the game, but there's some things to celebrate and enjoy. Hell yeah.
That's awesome. And all right, we're on the air. Doesn't matter. You gotta leak. What are you playing? What's the deck for Planetary Qualifier?
Second. Okay, that should be fixed now. All right. There we go. I don't know what happened with my OBS. My mic was not selected for my sound, so hopefully everyone can hear me now on the live stream.
That's funny.
Yeah, so the deck that I have for the Planetary Qualifier this time around is a Sabine deck. So Sabine with ECL, which is Energy Conversion Lab. So yeah, getting ready for that. Yeah. Again, don't have all the cards that I would like, but I think I've found some good filler cards to kind of fit into it. So I think it'll still be good though, because I still have some of the decent cards. So it still is an aggro deck, and I think it'll still do what Sabine is meant to do. So,
Hey.
That's the important part, right?
Hey, Sabine and ECL are pretty good cards. I don't think
Yeah.
I don't think you're gonna need to lean on much else. I'm liking your odds.
Thanks. Yeah. Yeah. So we'll see how it goes. Last time I checked, there was 16 players registered through the melee.gg, but I'm sure there'll probably be even more people that haven't actually registered on the site yet and stuff. So we'll see how many people actually end up showing up, but it's not going to be the full 128, I'm sure, but still probably a decent showing at least. So I'm excited for that. And I guess in terms of talking about some Star Wars stuff, we can start jumping into some news, which I will bring up that for Star Wars, they did announce two days before they went live, which I was kind of I don't want to say not impressed with, but was a little surprising. But they basically on a Wednesday, they said, hey, by the way, this coming Friday, tickets for Worlds are going to be going on sale. So that went live last Friday, I believe that was. So tickets for the World Championship, the Galactic Championship for Star Wars are on sale. That is happening in Las Vegas at the end of July. The last weekend of July. So that's exciting. Lots of people kind of hyped about that. And I know I was able to get my tickets and kind of set up my hotel and stuff for that. And then they also announced and are kind of starting to roll out some info for the regional and sector qualifiers. So regionals and nationals level events. So we do have that kind of info. And the biggest news there, I would say, is they also are revealing a lot of the prizing and the prize wall stuff for all of those events as well. So people can kind of check that out and see if there's cards and play mats and different stuff that they're interested in getting at those events as well. So pretty cool to have all of that competition and info ahead of time, because I know a lot of people are really chomping at the bit to get into some more competitive for Star Wars. So especially this being the first year, the first full year of tournaments and people getting into them, and it's going to be the first World Championship. So yeah, very exciting there. What else do we have for news? Is there any Universes stuff, Dankest?
Well, we do have a fun news item. So last night, if you're involved in the community, you may have seen that the champion cards for Universes have returned. So this tradition predates when I started playing, but nowadays, if you were the Universes World Champ, so if you're the person who's going to take home the event this Sunday, then they make you into a card. This is not like Magic, where they make a card look like you, or Hearthstone, where they make a vague reference to you on the card with the flavor text or the name. They turn you yourself, the person, into a card. So two players, Nick Reagan and Mitchell Camino, got their champion cards from the last year, and they had a little show match last night playing with their characters against each other. So, pretty cool thing. If you are going to be in Florida for the last chance qualifier today, or for Nationals tomorrow, or Worlds, excuse me, tomorrow, you can get your chance to grab a copy of one of these promos. They've got 200 each and are handed them out, and you'll be able to redeem them online. So really cool program, really unique prize, and, you know, would definitely be beyond cool to win one of those just playing the game.
Yeah, it's awesome. I love that idea.
Yeah, that sounds super fun.
Yeah, so pretty neat stuff there. Critical Role Heroes of Exandria pre-releases in a few weeks, but for now, enjoy Nationals, and we'll see whose champ card is going to be, or enjoy Worlds. Nationals I'm still got it on my mind. I'm still stuck in Texas, but enjoy Worlds, and hey, you know, in a few more weeks, we'll see who's next, and we'll be joining the Critical Role cast.
Nice. Yeah, there's a good bit of Hearthstone news that came out since the last show that we did. There's been a patch since the last show, something like 40 battlegrounds changes, of which I can tell you literally nothing about since I never ever play battlegrounds. But big shakeup, and there were 3 cards that got changed in standard Hearthstone. Nexus Prince Shafar wound up basically getting nuked and is no longer playable. It was banned for a little bit of time and then is now fully unplayable because it no longer gives stacking of its buffs to things, so you can't, you know, spread out the buffs on copies and then keep going like crazy. And Fizzle got changed to once per game on both the Fizzle itself and the snapshot. And then there was a change to a Protoss card, Void Ray, that went from a 1 health minion to a 2 health minion. That was it as far as the standard changes, but they still had an interesting, decent shakeup of some of the meta. And we've seen a little bit of like Protoss deck resurgence, but mainly it's still been dominated by Shaman. Shaman just went from a deck that went longer game with Fizzle to a deck that just does the more tempo thing. And after that, very recently, just yesterday, at time of recording, there was a big announcement about the upcoming new year of Hearthstone, which is the Year of the Raptor. We even have a cinematic trailer for the first time in forever. I think since Whizbang was the last time we had a cinematic trailer for a Hearthstone event. So that's pretty cool and exciting. It was a great, fun trailer to watch as well. There's going to be an in-game event like usual that kind of kicks things off. The start of card reveal season is coming next week, along with that in-game event that just gives you some rewards. And whatever the new Year of the Raptor card is, it's called Raptor Herald, or it's a Raptor Herald card. We don't have all of the details. We know that it's a Raptor, and it's a 3-mana 4/2 minion, and I'm assuming it will have card text and will not just be a fully textless vanilla 3-mana 4/2 minion, because that would be the most hilarious unplayable thing ever. It seems like they're probably just teasing it, and then they'll reveal what it will be later. There's going to be a new game board, which is also the first time we've seen that happen in a little while. Some core set changes. I say some, I mean, there's a lot. Each class is going to have, I think, around 4 cards that are going to be leaving the core set, and they'll be replaced by some different cards. Some of them are brand new, like in the case of Death Knight and Mage. And then there's going to be some core set cards that get adjustments, as well as a whole bunch of cards that are leaving the core set and a whole bunch that are entering the core set. I won't get into all of them here, but you can check it out on the official Hearthstone website in the news section, and there's graphics to see every single card that is going to be entering and leaving core. There's also a teaser about Hearthstone esports coming back. We know that they've made their announcement of an announcement, and I guess here's another announcement that an announcement is coming in true Hearthstone fashion. It's interesting to see that TJ Sanders is now the program lead for Hearthstone esports. And there's cautious optimism about the system being better than it has been in years past, because we finally have, the full I guess involvement of China as a region in Hearthstone that is returned, and obviously the injection of a whole lot of money from that side of things makes it possible, maybe, that competitive Hearthstone could be more of a thing than just for like the top 16 players. So everyone's kind of holding their breath, fingers crossed. Don't get your hopes up too much, but also maybe get your hopes up for the first time in a couple of years, because it's probably better than what it was last few years. Question mark. Yeah. So
the wording
we'll
seemed a little bit more optimistic in terms of like involving more people and stuff, kind of than it has the last couple of years. So
there was actually a great tweet from Pocket Train recently about that, how he was saying that the wording in the previous ones was like embarrassed, and this one is like kind of lend some optimism and excitement. So we will see. Stay tuned for some interesting stuff coming. And they've also announced the timing and roadmap of what this year in Hearthstone is going to look like. The expansions being Into the Emerald Dream, the Shrouded City, and the Heroes of Time. And, obviously much more details to come in the future. But a lot of cool, interesting things. I think I even forgot to mention pets are coming. Whatever they are, I don't really know, but there will be pets. I assume it's fully cosmetic, probably a purchasable option. So nothing that would impact gameplay or have any kind of bearing on how you want to enjoy the game if you don't want to spend any money on the game. But more cosmetic options is always good to boost the profitability and therefore the longevity of the game. So sure. Something cool.
Well,
I guess
you've been having great pet experiences lately, so hopefully it's more of the same.
I will probably not be partaking in the pets in Hearthstone nor in real life.
Yeah,
not for the immediate foreseeable future.
That's kind of how I took it too. Is like it's probably just a cosmetic kind of thing, right? Like, not Lorcana. Why do I have Lorcana on the brain? Runeterra and Magic Arena, both kind of have very similar things that you can get different, like, I think even in Magic Arena they're called pets, and they're like just little pet type characters that sit on like the side of the board and have little animations and move around a little bit. And they're not
right.
They don't, like you said, they don't impact the game at all. It's just like a cosmetic thing. They, some of them are free or you can earn them with like achievements. Some of them you buy, some of them, so I wouldn't be surprised if
basically, we heard you had ADD, so we decided to give you a little extra to keep you occupied.
Not me, who already like spams the board with mouse clicks. What?
Nah.
Couldn't be.
I usually just pull up Subway Surfers in my other monitor, but I guess if I can click on the board, that'll do.
For the low cost of $100 or something. It's probably not that much.
Probably like 80. Nice and reasonable. Round number.
In the range of 60 to 80 to 100, I'm sure.
I hope not.
And then you too can have a digital creature to interact with while you're playing the game. But yeah, interesting, fun stuff, and a whole slew of things that are coming in the near future. And everyone who at least is invested in the competitive side of Hearthstone is waiting with bated breath for the announcement for what's going to happen come March, which I think is when they said the official competitive season is going to start, and ladder will count for qualifying. So coming soon.
Yeah, which we're getting very close to that already, because as of recording today, it is February 14th. So we're already halfway through this month. So yeah, if we don't, get some info soon, and they're going to be, using March as qualifying, then people are definitely going to be chomping at the bit as this month progresses to have that info so that they know kind of what they might need to do, or if they are even going to be able to compete. Because in the last couple of years, some people are like, I don't even have a chance. I'm not even going to bother trying. So if there is some sort of expansion on the program and more people get to qualify, then, that might encourage more people to actually try. So I'm sure that people are going to be wanting that info before March. So hopefully we do get that sooner rather than later.
Definitely.
All right. Well, that's a lot of competitive stuff that we talked about. I feel like we kind of talk about these, the way that card games kind of ebb and flow. We kind of seem to have like releases, which all kind of came out like at the end of January. We had like multiple, I think like 2 or 3 at least different card games kind of release stuff at the end of January, at least the ones we talk about, probably even more. And now we're kind of jumping into more of we're getting competitive info, tournaments are happening, things are either, winding down and kind of coming to their conclusion, like Worlds for Universes, or they're starting to ramp up and get ready for things like that. So that's kind of where we're at in terms of overall card game stuff. But how about an actual discussion now at this point, and let's talk about card advantage.
All right.
Ron, would you like to kick things off?
Absolutely. So our topic today is on card advantage, which we've kind of subtitled as more than just drawing extra cards. And there's a lot to dive into with this topic. The main thing is pretty much like with most things, I think, context based and trying to determine essentially how to leverage whatever position that you're in to your maximum benefit. And that might mean a lot of different things in different circumstances in the game that you're in. But for the most part, you could like just simply define it as I have more cards than you. Or, my one card that I'm using judiciously is more impactful than the 4 cards that you just played, so it sort of gives me that leverage in that way. And there's multiple branching pathways to go out from there, but that's like as simply as I can start things off, I guess. I don't know, Dankest probably has a lot to say on.
Why do you just assume I have so many things to say so often?
Because so often you do.
Like
experience.
Yeah.
Okay,
History has told us
fair.
you do.
All right, fair enough. So one of the sort of pieces, right, that you talk about with card quality is interesting because, we're not just observers here. I've said before, this game isn't something we just happen upon. It's something that people design and make. And to some extent, it's baked into the card game that certain cards need to be worth more or less than others. And we come from Hearthstone, so let's, jump in the time machine and go back to a simpler time in 2014 and 15 when Hearthstone was just coming out. And there were cards in Druid, like Innervate and Wild Growth, that were giving Druid access to lots and lots of mana, and, maybe they still are a little bit today. And then you had classes like Paladin that didn't have access to lots of cards and didn't have access to lots of mana. And the question you got to ask yourself is, well, if that's the case, how are paladins supposed to win the game? And the answer is a little bit of this card advantage. It needs to be baked into paladins' design that in some way, by spending less mana, they can keep up with the value generated by their opponents. And, we've seen Divine Favor. That's their tool that literally lets them draw cards. But back in the day, a card like True Silver Champion for 4 mana was doing a lot more for you than the 4 mana swipe was. And that sort of imbalance isn't really an imbalance at all, because Druid can play that swipe as early as turn 1, or a Chillwind Yeti even, as we saw. So, kind of that imbalance across classes, different archetypes is something to think about. And outside of advantage, I'll turn the mic back over to Dawn to talk about card selection, which is another aspect that different groups have access to. So what is the difference, Dawn, between selection and strict advantage?
That's a good question. I wasn't
It's a quiz.
expecting this. I know.
Well,
quiz.
Tough quiz.
Well,
I want
I'm
what?
not going to leave you in the hole. We'll start with an example. So you're looking at Hearthstone. We got Dredge is a pretty good Hearthstone example of card selection, right? Are we on the same page now?
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. I was like, what do you mean selection? Are we talking like cards you put in your deck, or like, okay, yeah. I think another really good example of that in Hearthstone is like Discover. And I would say like the Pokemon TCG is also very good at that, right? Like,
Yes.
You search your deck for very specific things. In Magic, Tutor is often talked about, or even in multiple card games, right? That kind of transcended Magic and kind of crossed over into other card games, like that Tutor effect of really being able to search for specific stuff or draw specific things out of your deck. And selection in terms of like what you're bringing up, like Dredge or like the Discover options, that kind of stuff is even more specific than just getting to draw a spell or getting to, draw a land or something more generic. So yeah, it's really interesting to talk about that in terms of card advantage, because you get the choice instead of it being just drawing extra cards. It's a deeper like choice than that, and there's always going to be different like levels of decisions that you're going to put into what card you're choosing when you get those options, and it's going to depend on like the board state or what deck you're playing, what deck your opponent is playing, right? Like all of those kind of have to factor in when you are getting a choice of what to do. And kind of how the game has progressed. Like, are you behind and you need to choose some like more powerful card that you can just play, like that one card that's going to use all of your mana or all of your resources to play, and it's kind of like a big threat, and that's going to kind of get you back? Or do you have to choose some sort of removal because that's what your opponent has done? And that kind of choice can actually lead to being able to actually turn the game. We kind of talked about this in terms of like when we had our discussion about being behind and then making those plays and those choices, right, to like try to turn the game around from being behind and kind of come back. But I think there's also choices to be made and trying to keep that advantage even if you're ahead, especially when you're talking about selection as well.
Definitely. And it just makes it so much trickier too, because for Pokemon, you have Ultra Ball, which is just the quintessential classic. So you play Ultra Ball, you discard 2 cards from your hand, and you can grab any Pokemon in your deck. And that's very powerful, but at the same time, you're giving up 3 cards to get 1. And yet, that card is considered one of the most important cards in Pokemon because it makes decks so consistent, and giving up that advantage for selection intrinsically is really valuable. And it is just such a difficult value to really nail down like you would with something in another game. Then Hearthstone, you even have tracking versus draw a card, right? discover a card from your deck, draw a card. One is not equal to one, even though both of them leave you with one more card than the other. Being able to look at 3 and pick one is just so much better than taking one at the top, even if you aren't, generating an absurd number of extra copies of said card. It's still better, I promise.
It's also, yeah, it's great that you bring up the specific example of tracking, because of tracking being changed from what it used to be to what it is now. When tracking literally used to be a deck thinning tool as well. And, a lot of players didn't really, I feel like they weren't really able to process the actual benefit of that, where it's like, hey, you're not likely to see these cards over the course of the game. Like, you're not going to be able to play your entire deck, so you can just remove things that won't really be relevant to the game situation. So tracking gets to find you a card that you need, and then you discard the others. They're gone, and now your deck is thinner. So if you're playing an aggro deck, you have a higher chance to draw the other more impactful things that you need for later in the game. But most people seem to just complain too much, like, oh no, I'm losing those, I want those cards. I'm really upset that I now no longer have the opportunity to have this card at any point in this game for the rest of the game. And so it wound up getting changed, and each version is good and suits a different style of gameplay. But it's this interesting concept just based around like the whole idea of discarding things as it plays in with card advantage. Like Warlock was so difficult, it seemed, for the Hearthstone team to figure out how to make a good deck that has a trade-off where they benefit from discarding cards, because they lose so much in the card advantage for discarding, especially when it's discarding things at random. And it's like, hey, this thing in my hand that I just discarded, I needed to not discard that. If I discarded the other thing, it would be great, but I discarded the good thing and now it's really bad. And that was a whole like just fascinating thing. It basically made discard Warlock fully unplayable, horrifically bad, right up until a certain point where it was insanely good.
Right. And yeah, it's just that bit of critical mass, right?
Mhm.
Because as soon as that one little thing tips the scale, could it be the inclusion of Soul Barrage? Could it be 1 health on Silverware Golem? Could it be the chamber location that is doing just a smidge too much for 2 mana? Who knows?
Probably
But
that one. Probably that last one.
but at every time you added each one of those things in, you took something that was at first completely unusable and made it incredible.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, to say nothing of the other like element of the game where it's just you're trying to balance, like, okay, how many resources do I have versus how many resources does my opponent have over the course of this game. And we've had different conversations about resources, how that played into like how Hearthstone developed over the years, where it became less a game about carefully managing your limited resources to how do I manage my infinite resources. But somewhere in between and along the line, just simpler concepts like I'm playing a more aggressive deck and I'm playing against a warrior and their turn 5 is coming up, and I have a bunch of smaller minion cards that I want to play on the board in order to get there and kill them faster. However, I could invest these 3 cards out of my 6 card hand, and their 7 card hand will still have 6 cards to answer the next waves of things that I do when they play their 1/5 mana brawl and get rid of almost all the cards that I just put on the board. So that kind of thing is a very interesting like idea, to have to figure out what do I do to approach this puzzle and maintain the kind of card advantage that I might currently have with the board state being what it is and the amount of resources I have and what I expect my opponent to do.
for sure. But like, yeah, I miss that day of limited resource management. But there's no question that when you have someone piloting a deck like Garrote Rogue, the Past Cycle Rogue, Nature Shaman, or even the recent Discover Hunter, that we tout, like it is interesting to sort of see that shift and how that change in skill needs to come about. So another question is, when you look at card advantage across different games, do you feel like when you're kind of switching games, doing that little bit of a code switch, do you need to kind of adjust your way of thinking? Like, draw a card, you've said it too, John, doesn't mean the same thing in Pokemon that it means in Hearthstone. If you're trying out a new game, how do you try to wrap your head around just those very simple 3 words? What does it mean?
Yeah, that's where I think it gets really tough if you play multiple card games, is actually trying to think about like how you use those different things. And I think a really good example is like, for me, going from Hearthstone and then playing Wild Hearts, I was kind of in that like play one single thing for all my resources, right? Like get that kind of advantage of like, I'm playing the biggest thing I can. And in Wild Hearts, that's not really the best way to play. You actually want to have, in terms of like card advantage, you're playing multiple cards per turn, not like one thing per turn. And that's where you get a lot of your advantage, is by being able to do multiple things. And I think in a way, also Runeterra and Star Wars Unlimited are a little bit that same way. And I think it's partly because of the mechanic that all those games share of the alternate actions, right? So like there is actually a strategy of having that card advantage of playing multiple cards in a turn and doing multiple things and taking advantage of that mechanic of the game. So definitely, I think you do have to actually like change up how you play and think about it differently depending on the game that you're playing. And as you said, even things like card draw is not the same in every game, right? Like every card game has different draw that you're looking for, whether is it a specific type of draw? Do you have the resources like built into your deck, like Pokemon with energy? Or I mean, Pokemon is like an interesting one because there is so much like very specific draw, but if it's just straight up draw a card, you could draw an energy card and it's like, well, that's not what I want. Or in Magic, you could draw a land and it'd be like, that's not what I want. Whereas in other games that don't have the resources built into the deck like that, and use like a mana system, or use like you get to choose what card you're using as resources, you're more likely to draw something that you can take advantage of the game, that card mechanic, right? Like you can actually do something, hopefully, with the card you draw. Sometimes it's going to still be a terrible card, or it's like, hey, we're like playing the late game and I just drew this one cost thing. That sucks. I can't do anything with that. But card draw means different things in different card games, and I think even just the mechanics that the games are built on do have to impact how you play and how you think about card advantage for that specific game.
Completely agreed. And like those kind of games too, like I also get my head just bent out of shape completely in a game where cards are more temporary resources. So if you look at something like, say, Flesh and Blood, right, or Universes, which I play, you draw a fresh hand of cards every turn. And, in a game like Hearthstone or Magic or Runeterra, you're amassing resources as you draw cards. You're getting more and more options for later. And with Universes, not the case. You're getting options for right now, right this second. Because if you don't use those options, you're going to fill up your hand anyway. And that just makes for some really tough math in my mind, where it's figuring out, if I even have card draw in the first place, is this the time to use it? Because, I'm not getting it back. Like, I won't be able to draw a card next turn if I use this draw now, but if I do, the next card might not even help me. I may not use it, and I'll just have wasted it. And it just is a completely different sort of resource. And that challenge is part of what I like about playing all these different games. I get to flex my brain in just so many new ways.
That's definitely cool. It's a good element of just like, hey, you've got different styles for different things, and you can't just play every card game the exact same way. That'd be insane. I mean, you could try. You'd probably wind up losing a whole lot. But yeah, I love the concept of like, how do you manage this in this situation, and what's right in one situation might be wrong in another situation. Like, if you go back to the example you brought up of Paladin having divine favor in the early days of Hearthstone, um, where it's like, hey, in most situations, you might be thrilled as a slower deck to see that your opponent is nearly out of resources. Look, they only have one card, and I have like 9 of them. I'm in great shape. Wait a minute, that's a Paladin who has just one card. I should probably get rid of some of these cards, even though they don't really help me here, because I'm more reactive, they're more proactive, and the amount of cards I have will be the amount of cards they have if they play this one card. So I should reduce the amount I have so they don't get as many. Type of situation is also just a really interesting context-based decision that you're faced with when you talk about just the overall concept of card advantage and how it relates to all types of different games and game situations.
Definitely. And I love when I'm playing that warrior deck. It's usually, all right, how do I use as few of these answers as I can
Yeah,
to get
the
the
classic
job
control
done?
mindset. Yeah. I
Because
just want to use one card at a time, or none if I can.
yeah, and it's like the trade-off between using cards in your health to try and extend the game and reach the point where you do win eventually. But then sometimes instead it's, oh, that's a paladin. How
Oops.
do I just use as many cards as I can, value notwithstanding? I know I'll have more stuff than they do, even if I use my cards inefficiently, but I just gotta throw as many as I can out of my hand all at once to make sure that they don't draw 9 and overwhelm me on that turn I can't afford.
Yep.
Yeah.
Or, I guess bait if you happen to have a perfect answer for like a try to overwhelm you turn, but that's much more rare in a different situation. Possible.
Yeah.
I think
But
it's also
it's never going to
interesting.
be as. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, like, that sort of thing never will seem as fun as just pressing the armor button and hitting end turn, but maybe you can teach me someday.
Tank up to rank up.
Indeed.
Oh my gosh. I forgot we have a control player on this show. Ugh, get out of here. No, just kidding. Don't leave. You have too many good insights. No, he's gone.
Oh, we've lost him. We've lost him to the streets of Ohio. Oh, he's back.
See, these aggro players have no object permanence, ladies and gentlemen. Always remember that.
This is the first time I've seen you.
Yeah. Yeah. Who are you?
Oh, nailed it.
No, I think you bring up an interesting point, like talking about hand size as well. Because I think that's something that, like, I don't want to say like the basic level, but I feel like when you're learning a card game and trying to get better, like, the majority of players, like, their initial thought is to, like, I just have to get as many cards as possible, right? I have to, like, fill up my hand and have all these different options to be able to do stuff. And even though you could potentially have more cards in your hand than your opponent, that's, as we've talked about, that's not always the definition of card advantage, and that's not always the best thing. But there are strategies in different card games, like, depending on, again, the mechanics of the game, what the decks are trying to do, where you have, like, mill decks, right, who try to get through, and it's a little bit different than card advantage, but, like, you're trying to mill your opponent and make them draw as many cards as possible, get through their deck, because the mechanic of that game might be as soon as they try to draw a card and they can't, maybe they lose the game, or once they have no cards to draw, they're going to take fatigue style damage, and then, you know, their health will go to 0 very quickly. But there's also this idea that, like in Hearthstone, for example, of filling up your hand so that maybe I'm going to overdraw a card from my deck, but also maybe I'm going to overdraw a bomb or a plague or something like that, where there actually is more advantage to filling up your hand rather than just using those cards in the context of like actually playing them out. So I don't know. That's just kind of something that you made me think of when you mentioned hand size.
And like, I don't know if there's any game that does it like that besides Hearthstone, where if you have a maxed out hand and you're full, you can just get around everything. That is like, that play pattern is so fun, but it's definitely very unique. I don't know if like it's, you know, we've been around. We've played a couple of games here and there, but I just cannot think of any that are that way.
Yeah. I know some card games
That's a cool
do
kind
also.
of alternate strategy.
Yeah. It definitely is. Some card games also have the like hand size limits, where maybe at the end of a turn you might have to discard cards or get down to a certain hand size, which also is very interesting, because then it kind of does incentivize you to play more of your cards so that you're not just kind of, as you mentioned earlier, Dank, is like amassing the resources, right? It's like, well, I need to make sure that I'm potentially playing some of these cards or using them up so that I don't have to get rid of them. Or maybe there is strategy where maybe I just need to draw some cards, try to find something better than the cards that I do have, because you know, I need something better to play. And if I have more cards than the hand limit at the end of the turn, I'll just pitch a couple of those cards to get rid of those, discard them, that aren't doing me any good in this case. So there's definitely interesting mechanics and ways that you can think about like card advantage, and in terms of hand size, and whether you have to play cards out, save cards, or get rid of cards at the end of the turn. Kind of very similar to also something you mentioned, Dankes, with some of the games, right, where like you draw a new hand at the start of the turn. So sometimes it's like, if you don't use them, you lose them. So how are you managing that in terms of your cards?
For sure. All this talking though, now I just want to play card games. Why would you do this to me?
Disaster.
I was
Happens
gonna
all
say
the time.
perfect. Like the opposite reaction. Like, yes, go play card games. Yes, go.
I was thinking about the fact that when we're talking about all this, there's also the whole concept of just trying to like manufacture your own advantage within the game, independent of like, you know, what your deck or your opponent's deck might be, and how valuable, you know, your cards are compared to their cards, and so on. By just doing things like fully playing for tempo, where, you know, lots and lots of players want to have their card do the thing that it's supposed to do in its optimal situation. But many times you're not able to do that, and many times you also need to identify the appropriate time to take advantage of the situation that you're in. Something as simple as like, hey, it's Hearthstone, it's turn 2, you have a greedy partner that you would prefer to have a coin from because you're holding another 2-mana card, but guess what, you're not, and it's a 2-mana 2/3 and you don't have any other plays to do. This is the type of situation where you often will want to play that card for tempo, maybe the next card for tempo, and so on. And the effect that winds up happening is maybe you force out one of your opponent's higher value cards at an inopportune time for them, which decreases the amount of card advantage that they can wind up having over you, because this higher value thing that they wanted to use later, they weren't able to use later. They needed to use it now because of the pressure you put on them from the decisions that you made to make multiple debatably suboptimal decisions, at least in terms of like the cards best case scenario. So that kind of stuff I always get fascinated by, and like really draws me to different card games, just in general, if there's a way to play like that. And most of them of course have that type of strategy available, where it's like, yeah, okay, I can commit to this type of thing that compromises things for my opponent and then makes things opens up more opportunities for me.
Awesome.
I think that's cool.
It is.
Tempo good. That's what I meant.
No, don't listen to him.
Yeah, or hear me out. Don't play the 2/3 armor up.
Disaster.
You'll definitely get enough to survive all the asteroids, I swear.
No.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, all different kinds of games. You've got just such varying different decisions to make. Like, I wouldn't know the first thing about how to start playing in some of the games that you guys play in with just my Hearthstone knowledge, where it's like, drawing cards is good, right? I want to do that. I want to stack up these resources. Generally, I've always kind of felt like one of the absolute best things you can do in a card game is to get more cards. But that is, depending on the way different games play, completely not how you should approach certain situations. So it requires like a total overhaul of your thinking as you jump from game to game, which is always pretty impressive to see people succeed in like multiple different games and be able to switch their strategies so quickly.
Right. Yeah. And, no matter what, I feel like you always are following one of two heuristics, which is have options or have the right option. And it's a bit of a spectrum, but in different games, you're going to want to be weighting one over the other. Pokemon, I think, being the extreme of having the right option, because you are willing to give up 3 cards just to get the one card that situationally is the best thing you can have, versus having multiple options where, I think in kind of old school Runeterra or old school Magic, being able to have all of these cards, have access to resources is really good. And even the aggro decks are ones that are artificially letting you have options. Like I said at the beginning of the show, I was playing some Magic again. I got to show my friend the power of Experimental Frenzy, which, Ron, I think is a card you would like. So this is 3 colorless and a red. An artifact, red artifact. It says, you cannot play cards from your hand. So already we've inverted this card advantage bit a bit. And then you can play the top card of your deck at any time and look at it. So then there is another cost activated ability for 3 in a red to destroy your Experimental Frenzy. So what you do is you play mono red, you put all your cards on the table, and then you play the Experimental Frenzy, and suddenly, your empty hand is a full one, because as long as you keep top decking gas, you're off to the races. And it is a super fun card.
Yeah.
But, it definitely puts it in perspective, because this one card, if you, manage to avoid more than 2 lands off the top for a little bit, can be 3 or 4 cards every turn for an aggro deck, which is really, really impactful.
Yeah, it's insane. I like it.
Me too.
One thing that I just thought about as well that I don't think we've really touched on yet is the concept of like combat in games as well, and how that can affect card advantage in terms of you might hear streamers, especially in like Hearthstone or something, or even other games, right, where they'll say like, okay, this creature or this minion can get like a 2-for-1. And that means that it can kill off 2 of their things for your 1. So ideally, you're killing off 2 cards for your 1 card. that can change depending on if like they're tokens or things that were created by another card. Like in Hearthstone, Unleash the Hounds. Sorry, Ron. That's the example I thought of. Unleash the Hounds.
They didn't bring them
I
back.
know.
Where are my best boys?
But like that card or other cards that create like tokens, right? They generally, for one card, you're getting multiple things. Ideally, you're using those like multiple things to trade into multiple things of your opponents, and getting kind of card advantage that way as well. And I think depending on the card game and how combat works and is decided also has a big impact on the decisions that you make in terms of trying to capitalize on that card advantage in terms of like the board state, when making trades or attacking, because sometimes in card games like Runeterra or Magic, where the defender decides what creatures are getting get hit into what other creatures, right? They get to pick. So they have the advantage there a little bit more than in games like Hearthstone or Star Wars, where the attacker is picking what is getting attacked into. So that's another thing that I think is kind of important to talk about for card advantage, and like determining how you're getting advantage that way as well from your cards.
That's a great point. Yeah, and there's multiple examples of that, at least in Hearthstone, being like even a commonly accepted shorthand like AVT. There's like, you always want to value trade, and essentially that just plays into the whole card advantage concept, where it's like, yeah, at any point, if I can make my opponent spend 2 for the 1 that I spent, that is going to help me, and I can leverage these incremental like building advantages into a point where I'm in a more favorable situation to win the game. So, if you have a 3/3 minion and your opponent has a 2/3 minion and a 3/2 minion, you probably want to kill the 2/3 with your 3/3 so it stays as a 3/1 instead of hitting the 3/2 to where they both die. Now you have nothing and your opponent still has a thing on the board. Now they have to find another way to deal with the thing that you have remaining. Stuff like that in just its simplest form.
Yeah. I think
do you guys hear that? I think Ron is gone and was replaced by an arena player. Someone look
These
into
aren't
this.
really concepts that have as much meaning anymore in 2025 Hearthstone. I'll grant you that, but still fundamentals that you learn in Arena, and I loved Arena back in the day when I played it. It was great. It was great doing that kind of stuff. It was like, and then I make this value trade, and now I have a slight advantage, and now things can build on that. But then, today's Hearthstone, it's like, oh, funny trades you made. Okay, I'm going to wipe the entire board and make a giant board of things. Cool value trade that you did, though.
Yeah. Actually, one thing you said reminded me as well that, like, you mentioned about how, okay, if you make a value trade, let's say with a 3/3 into a 2/3, and now it's a 3/1, in Hearthstone, that's permanent. Right, the damage stays on permanently, but in other games, that damage goes away at the end of combat or the end of the round, depending on like what game you're talking about. So there is more value in certain games as well in making value trades when that health is just gonna go back to whatever the stats on the card are, which is also
that always
kind
drove
of
me
interesting.
crazy. I was like, so it's invincible. I
That's
can't do that much damage in a single turn. If I can chip away at it, I can kill it. What? Can't deal with this thing. Yeah. But that's the Hearthstone player in me.
Fair. All right. Any closing thoughts on this topic before we wrap it up for this week?
I think when it comes to, go ahead.
No, you start.
I was going to say, when it comes to like just thinking about card advantage, so much just is so heavily context based, not just the game that you're playing or the situation that you're in, but really just having a complete understanding of what you're trying to do, what they're trying to do, and how can you exploit this situation right now, or the likely situation that's coming in like 1 to 2 turns, based on, your knowledge about the game, what you can predict, in order to leverage your situation to be as favorable as possible. Like with most concepts in card games, it comes down to that. And card advantage is very much having a deep understanding of what that means, not just in terms of the board situation, or the number of cards, or how much cards you can draw, or how much cards they have, but also what each card is valued at in a relative sense for like the scenario you're in. So it's so hard to pin down like the specifics. So the best thing I can always say is just like, if you can learn the ins and outs of the type of game that you're playing and identify those situations, you can really put the concepts into practice so much more and just be flexible.
Dankest?
No,
No.
my thunder has been stolen. I mean, you put that well. So,
Yeah.
not much else to say. Draw a card, fires the neurons. I want to go do that now.
Good stuff. All right. Is it me, or I don't think I was in bold. I had to double check.
It's me now.
Go
So,
for it.
thank you for joining us this week. And if you or someone you know would be interested in joining us, please reach out to us. You can email us at tccgroundtable@protonmail.com. Follow us on Twitter. Use our top pinned tweet for a link to our Discord, or use the link in the description show notes. Check out our video version on youtube.com/c/dragonrider TCCG. You also can find us everywhere you can find audio podcasts, and you can find us a little bit more every week. Dawn is on it, so yeah, we're getting back in there. You also can use our Ink Gaming affiliate if you want to grab some playmats, accessories like sleeves, or other sweet merch. And you also, speaking of merch, can grab our Amber Flight Gaming merch, and just check out Amber Flight Gaming in general. Individually, you can find me on Blue Sky as DankestDad, on Discord as DankestDad, on YouTube and Twitch as DankestDad CCG, and of course, on the streets of Ohio this weekend, celebrating my birthday. Woohoo!
Hey, happy
And
birthday.
thanks. Ron and Dawn, where can we find you guys?
Well, you can find me on Twitter at Ron_HS, where I do nothing but tweet that I'm going live on Twitch, basically. And then you can find me streaming on Twitch Monday through Friday around 7 p.m. Eastern at RonMexico HS.
And you can find me on Twitter at DonnieDK, DAWNIEDK. You can find me on Blue Sky, Twitch, and YouTube, dragonrider TCCG. Talking all things standard Hearthstone over at the Dr. 3 HS podcast. And this past week as well, and frequently, I'm on usually about every like 2 months or so, or more frequently often. You can find me chatting other topics like this over at the Bread and Butter HS podcast as well.
Very nice. All right. Thank you all for watching, and we will see you next time at the Roundtable.